Arthur Frederick, billionaire CEO of Frederick Pharmaceuticals, owner of a 12-acre Connecticut estate, came home at midnight and found his paralyzed triplets laughing. That should have been impossible. Dave, Ava, and Pat hadn't smiled in 4 years. Not since the car accident that severed their ability to walk, feel, or hope. Arthur had hired 14 specialists, spent $4 million on treatments, consulted with Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, and 2 experimental programs in Switzerland. Every single one told him the same thing. Permanent paralysis, no hope of recovery, manage their comfort. So when he stood in the hallway outside their bedroom at 12:47 a.m. and heard his children laughing, actual joy, the kind he thought had died with their mother, he thought he was losing his mind. He pushed the door open, and what he saw the maid doing made his breath stop. Elizabeth Grimes, the $14 an hour caregiver he'd hired 3 months ago because she was the only applicant willing to work nights, was on her knees between his children's wheelchairs, hands gently guiding Ava's left leg in slow, deliberate circles. And Ava's toes were moving. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I believe this story found you today for a reason. What you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about who's really qualified to heal, who's worthy of trust, and whether God works through degrees or through willing hearts. This is a story about 3 children the system gave up on, a father who had everything except what mattered, and a maid who had nothing except the one thing that could save them. Now let me take you back to where it all started. The Frederick estate sits on 12 acres of Connecticut countryside like a monument to everything money can buy. Georgian architecture, marble floors imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes, 14 bedrooms, most of them empty, gardens designed by the same firm that maintains the grounds at Versailles. But inside, silence. Not the peaceful kind, the dead kind. Arthur Frederick built his fortune saving lives. As CEO of Frederick Pharmaceuticals, he held patents on compounds that treated heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. His net worth topped $2.1 billion. Hospitals around the world used medications that bore his company's name. He'd been photographed shaking hands with presidents, accepting humanitarian awards, cutting ribbons at research facilities. But he couldn't save the 3 lives that mattered most. 4 years ago, on a rainy November evening, Arthur was driving home from a board meeting. His wife Margaret sat beside him, laughing at something on her phone. In the back seat, their 4-year-old triplets, Dave, Ava, and Pat, were singing along to a children's song. Then the semi-truck ran the red light on I-95. Margaret died instantly. The triplets survived. Barely. Severe spinal trauma. Compressed vertebrae. Shattered hope. When Dave, Ava, and Pat woke up 3 days later, they couldn't feel their legs. Couldn't move them. Couldn't stand. Arthur walked away with bruises. He hired 14 specialists. Flew them in from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, 2 experimental programs in Switzerland. Spent $4.3 million on treatments, consultations, procedures that promised hope and delivered nothing. Every single doctor told him the same thing. Permanent paralysis, manage their comfort, no hope of recovery. So Arthur did what he knew how to do. He built them the best life money could buy. A wing of the mansion converted into a medical suite. 3 custom wheelchairs. Around-the-clock nursing staff. Physical therapists who went through the motions of maintenance care because there was nothing left to fix. But Arthur couldn't stay. Couldn't bear to look at his children for more than a few minutes at a time. Their silence reminded him too much of Margaret's absence. So he worked 16-hour days, 18-hour days. Sometimes he slept at the office. The children lived in one room now. 3 beds arranged in a semicircle. 3 wheelchairs parked beside them. One television that played cartoons no one watched. A window that overlooked gardens they'd never walk through again. They didn't speak much anymore. They didn't cry. They didn't smile. Just like their father. Silent tears rolled down Ava's face as she stared out that window, her small hands folded in her lap, her legs motionless beneath a pink blanket. She was 8 years old now. She couldn't remember what it felt like to run. The nurses moved through their routines with professional efficiency. Feeding times, medication schedules, sponge baths. They were kind enough but detached. This was a job. They clocked in, clocked out, and went home to families who could walk and laugh and live. And every night, the mansion returned to silence. Cold marble floors that echoed with footsteps that never came. Empty hallways lined with photographs of a family that no longer existed. Chandeliers that illuminated nothing but absence. Arthur told himself he was providing the best care money could buy, that he was doing everything a father could do, that some tragedies simply couldn't be fixed. He told himself that for 4 years. And then, 3 months ago, everything changed. Not because Arthur hired another specialist, but because he hired a maid. Elizabeth Grimes sat in the parking lot of the Frederick estate at 9:45 p.m., staring at the eviction notice taped to her dashboard. 14 days. 4 months behind on rent meant $4,800 she didn't have. This was her 7th job interview in 2 years. The other 6 had ended the same way. We've decided to go in a different direction. The scheduling doesn't quite work out. We're just not sure you're the right fit. But tonight, she couldn't afford pride. Her grandmother Loretta, 82 years old, congestive heart failure, needed $3,200 a month for assisted living. If Lizzie lost this job, Loretta would be transferred to the county facility, the place where patients went to die. Lizzie closed her eyes. Lord, please, just this one. The interview lasted 3 minutes. Arthur Frederick didn't look at her, didn't ask about her experience. He sat behind a mahogany desk, his tie loosened, his eyes distant. Can you work nights? He asked. The children need 24-hour care. Yes, sir. I can work whenever you need me. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. You start tonight. Head nurse Calloway will show you what to do. That was it. Hired. Not because she was qualified, but because she was the only applicant willing to work the graveyard shift. Head nurse Calloway met her at the children's wing. Stern, 50-something, 20 years tenure, and a face that said she'd seen everything. Listen carefully, Calloway said. Do not move the children. Do not touch their legs. Do not attempt any physical therapy. Your job is to keep them clean, fed, and comfortable. That's it. The specialists have determined there's nothing more to be done. Understand. Lizzie nodded, but something felt wrong. Her first night, she moved quietly through the dim room where Dave, Ava, and Pat slept. 3 small bodies. 3 wheelchairs waiting like silent sentries. She checked their vitals, adjusted their blankets, and then she noticed. When she gently tucked the blanket around Ava's legs, the girl's right toes twitched. Not much, just a flutter. When she moved Dave's wheelchair closer to the window, his left ankle flexed inward. Barely perceptible, but deliberate. When she sat beside Pat and read him a story, something Calloway said wasn't necessary. His knee trembled beneath the sheet. Lizzie had spent 2 years in nursing school before her world collapsed. 2 years learning pediatric neurology, physical therapy techniques, the difference between reflex and response. She dropped out when her younger brother Marcus died, and the tuition money went to funeral costs instead. But she remembered enough to know what she was seeing. These aren't reflexes. These are responses. She stood there, her heart pounding. 14 specialists had examined these children, doctors from the best hospitals in the world. And every single one had said, permanent paralysis, no hope, manage their comfort. But Lizzie saw something else. She saw children whose bodies were trying to heal, whose nerves were searching for pathways, whose muscles were waiting for someone to notice. That night, after her rounds, she knelt beside Dave's bed and prayed, "Lord, if you brought me here, show me what you want me to see." And in the silence of that cold mansion, she felt it. A whisper, not audible but undeniable. "You were brought here for them." Silent tears fell from Dave's eyes as Lizzie gently wiped his face and tucked him in. She leaned close and whispered, "I see you, baby. I see you." And that's when Lizzie made a choice that would either save these children or destroy her. Week 2. Lizzie waited until Nurse Calloway's footsteps faded down the hallway, until she heard the front door close at 10:30 p.m., until the mansion settled into silence. Then she quietly locked the children's door from the inside. Her hands were shaking. She knelt beside Dave's bed and whispered, "Baby, I'm going to move your leg. Tell me if it hurts, okay?" Dave's eyes widened. He hadn't been asked a question in months. Slowly, carefully, he nodded. It was the first real communication he'd made since the accident. Lizzie began with what she remembered from nursing school. Passive range of motion exercises. Nothing aggressive. Nothing that could cause harm. Just gentle movements to keep the muscles from atrophy, to remind the nerves that pathways still existed. Hip rotations. Knee bends. Ankle flexes. 20 minutes per child. She hummed while she worked, old hymns her grandmother used to sing. His eye is on the sparrow. The melody filled the quiet room like a prayer. Week 3, she brought construction paper and showed Ava how to fold paper cranes. Ava could still use her hands. The first bird she made was crooked, lopsided, but when she held it out to Lizzie with trembling hands, Lizzie cried. She tucked that tiny purple crane into her uniform pocket. From then on, every night, Ava folded a new one. It became their secret language, a small act of creation in a place that had forgotten how to hope. Week 4, everything changed. Lizzie was working with Pat, gently flexing his knee when she accidentally tickled the sensitive spot behind it. Pat giggled, an actual giggle, high-pitched, surprised, joyful. It was the first sound of happiness that room had heard in 4 years. Dave and Ava turned their heads, stared, and then, like sunlight breaking through clouds, they smiled. Lizzie pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming. "There you are," she whispered. "There you are." What she didn't know was that someone else was watching. Arthur Frederick had security cameras throughout the estate. Standard protocol for homes of his wealth. He rarely checked them, but week 5, working late at midnight, he clicked on the nursery feed out of habit and froze. The maid was on the floor, hands on Dave's legs, moving them in slow circles. And all 3 children were smiling. Arthur's finger hovered over the intercom button. He should stop this. Call Calloway. Fire her immediately. But he didn't. He rewatched the footage. The children's faces looked different. Alive. Present. Like they'd woken up from a 4-year sleep. What's she doing? For 2 weeks, Arthur watched every night. Saw Lizzie move through her quiet routine. Saw her hum those hymns. Saw the paper birds piling up on Ava's nightstand. Saw his children's faces transform from blank masks into something that almost looked like hope. But fear gnawed at him. What if she's hurting them? What if this causes permanent damage? What if he loses them completely because he let some unqualified maid experiment on their broken bodies? He didn't intervene, but he didn't look away either. And Lizzie, unaware of the cameras, continued her secret work. Every night at 10:30, she locked the door. Every night, she prayed before she began. "Lord, guide my hands. Protect them." Silent tears streamed down her face as she worked on Pat's legs, whispering prayers she hoped God was hearing. Please, let him feel this. She knew the risk. If Calloway discovered what she was doing, she'd be fired, reported, possibly arrested. But every time she thought about stopping, she'd see Dave's nod, Ava's paper crane, Pat's giggle. She couldn't walk away. But Lizzie's secret didn't stay hidden for long. Week 7. Nurse Calloway noticed something was different. She'd been working with the Frederick triplets for 4 years, and in all that time, nothing had changed. Their muscle tone stayed the same. Their responsiveness stayed flat. Their faces stayed blank. But now something was off. Dave's legs felt firmer when she repositioned him, less atrophied. Ava was humming to herself, something she hadn't done since the accident. Pat was more alert, tracking movement with his eyes. Calloway pulled up the overnight security footage. She had access to all the cameras. And there it was, week after week. The maid on her knees, hands on the children's legs, moving them through exercises. Unauthorized. Calloway's jaw tightened. That evening, before Lizzie's shift started, Calloway stormed into the children's room. Lizzie was just arriving, and the look on Calloway's face made her stomach drop. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Lizzie's mouth went dry. I don't lie to me. I've seen the footage. You've been performing physical therapy on these children without authorization, without a license." They were responding. Lizzie said quietly, "Their legs." "You are a maid." Calloway cut her off. "You have no medical training. You have no authority to touch these children therapeutically. What you're doing is called unlicensed medical practice, and it's illegal. But they're getting better. Their legs are paralyzed. Whatever you think you're seeing is placebo effect or muscle spasms. If you cause further spinal damage, you'll be criminally liable." Lizzie's hands were shaking. "I was just trying to help." "You're not qualified to help." Calloway stepped closer. "If you touch those children again, if you perform one more session, I will have you fired and reported to the state medical board. Do you understand me?" Lizzie's throat closed. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Calloway walked out, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Lizzie stood there, frozen. The children were staring at her from their beds. Ava's eyes were wide. Dave looked confused. Pat's lip was trembling. She couldn't breathe. That night, Lizzie sat in her car outside the estate, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. The eviction notice was still taped to her dashboard. 14 days had become 7. She had 2 choices. Obey Calloway. Stop the therapy. Keep the job. Pay the rent. Keep her grandmother safe in a facility where nurses checked on her, where she wouldn't die alone. Or disobey. Continue the therapy. Risk everything. Lose the job. Lose the apartment. Watch her grandmother transferred to the county facility where patients went to die. Silent tears fell down her face as she stared at that eviction notice, her breath fogging the cold windshield. Inside the mansion, Arthur sat in his study, watching the live feed from the children's room. He'd seen the confrontation, heard every word. Part of him agreed with Calloway. Lizzie wasn't a doctor, or she was causing harm. But another part of him remembered what he'd seen on those recordings. His children smiling, laughing, alive. He didn't intervene. He just watched, waiting to see what Lizzie would do. Before we continue, I need you to do something. Hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Because what happens next, what Lizzie chooses, will show you what real faith looks like. I believe this story found you today for a reason. Lizzie made her choice that night, and it broke her. Lizzie drove home that night and knelt beside her bed in the small apartment she was about to lose. Her hands were folded, her eyes closed, but the words felt like they were hitting a wall. "God, I don't know what to do. If I stop, those babies stay in those chairs. But if I keep going, I lose everything. Grandmother dies in that county home. I have nothing left." Silence. No answer. No whisper. Just the hum of the radiator and traffic outside her window. And then the memory came. The one she'd spent 12 years trying to bury. Marcus, her younger brother, 16 years old, complaining of back pain for months. Lizzie was 22 then, in nursing school, 2 semesters from graduating. She took him to 3 different doctors. All of them said the same thing. Growing pains, he's fine, he'll outgrow it. 6 months later, Marcus collapsed in the kitchen. The emergency MRI showed advanced spinal compression. Inoperable. By the time someone finally listened, the damage was irreversible. Marcus spent 4 weeks in the ICU. Paralyzed. In agony. Lizzie held his hand every day, watched him fade. His last words, whispered through cracked lips. "Lizzie, why didn't they listen?" She screamed at the doctors afterward. "I told you something was wrong." The doctor's response was calm, detached. "We did everything we could." But later, when Lizzie requested Marcus's file, she found it. A note from the first doctor. Possible spinal issue. Recommend follow-up MRI. Below that, stamped in red, no follow-up needed. Marcus died because someone didn't listen. Lizzie stood at his grave a week later, rain soaking through her coat, and whispered a promise. "I will never stay silent when I see suffering that others ignore. Never again." She dropped out of nursing school the next semester. Couldn't afford the tuition. Couldn't focus. That promise became the only thing she had left of her brother. And now, 12 years later, she was being asked to break it. Lizzie opened her eyes, tears streaming. "God, I made a promise. Over Marcus's grave, I promised. But if I keep that promise, I lose everything. Is that what you're asking?" Silence. She reached for her Bible, let it fall open. Matthew 10, verse 39. "Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Lizzie stared at the words until they blurred. Then she closed the book, wiped her tears, and whispered, "Okay, if this is what you're asking, I'll do it. But you have to be with me." Week 8. Night shift. Lizzie arrived at the estate at 10 p.m., hands shaking. She waited until Calloway's car pulled out, until the mansion settled into silence. Then she walked to the children's room and quietly locked the door. Dave, Ava, and Pat were awake, watching her with wide eyes. Lizzie knelt between the 3 wheelchairs. "Babies, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" All 3 nodded. She began the therapy, hands trembling as she moved Dave's leg through gentle rotations. This time, she prayed aloud. "Lord, guide my hands. Protect these children. If this is your will, let them feel hope again." Silent tears fell from her eyes as she worked, knowing this might be her last night with them. And that's when the miracle happened. Week 10. 2 more weeks of secret sessions. 2 more weeks of Lizzie risking everything while Arthur watched from his office, unable to intervene, unable to look away. The progress was undeniable now. Ava could flex both ankles fully. Pat could bend his knees 30 degrees. But Dave had come the furthest. His hips rotated. His thighs tensed when Lizzie worked them. Something was waking up inside his broken body. Tonight, Lizzie knelt beside him and whispered, "Baby, I need you to try something for me. I need you to try to stand. Just for a second. I'll hold you. I won't let you fall." Dave's eyes went wide with fear. And then he spoke. The first words he'd spoken in 4 years. "I can't." Lizzie's breath caught. She wiped her eyes and leaned closer. "Yes, you can. I know you can. Trust me." She lifted him gently under the arms, pulling him upright. His legs dangled, limp and useless. For a moment, nothing happened. Lizzie prayed aloud, her voice shaking. "Lord, if this is what you're asking, give him strength. Please." And then Dave's right leg twitched. His left knee bent. His feet touched the floor. And slowly, impossibly, his legs began to bear weight. "That's it, baby." Lizzie sobbed. "That's it." Dave's legs trembled violently, every muscle fighting against 4 years of atrophy, but they held. He took 1 step forward, Lizzie supporting most of his weight, but not all of it. Then another step. then a third, and then his legs gave out, and he collapsed in her arms, shaking, crying, laughing all at once. "Lizzie," he gasped. "Lizzie, I did it." The room exploded. Ava screamed from her bed. "Dave, you walked." Pat was laughing and crying at the same time. "Do it again. Do it again." All three children were sobbing, their faces lit with something that had been dead for 4 years. Joy. Pure, unfiltered, impossible joy. Lizzie held Dave, rocking him, her own sobs so loud she could barely breathe. "You did it, baby. You did it." In his office, Arthur sat frozen in front of the security monitor. He'd watched the whole thing. When Dave took that first step, Arthur's phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. He fell to his knees, hands pressed over his mouth, and wept. Deep, guttural sobs that tore through his chest. The kind of crying he hadn't done since Margaret's funeral. The kind that breaks you open and puts you back together at the same time. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Oh my God." The silent tears that had haunted the Frederick estate for 4 years were gone. Now there were only loud, joyful sobs echoing through that children's room. Laughter, life, hope. Lizzie held all three children as best she could, their small bodies trembling with exhaustion and exhilaration. They were alive again, truly alive. And for one perfect moment, everything felt possible. But moments like that don't last. Arthur sat in his office, staring at the screen, his mind racing. His son had just walked. After 4 years. After 14 specialists and $4.3 million, and every expert in the world telling him it was impossible. Maid had done what no one else could. He should have felt only gratitude, only awe. But fear crept in. What if this was temporary? What if she damaged something irreparably? What if he lost them because he'd let this happen? Arthur picked up his phone with shaking hands and made a call that would destroy everything. Arthur called Dr. Martin Pemberton at 1:20 a.m. His voice was breathless, shaking. "Martin, you need to come to the house. Now." Something happened with Dave. "What happened? Is he hurt?" "No, he walked." "Martin, he walked." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's impossible. I saw it. I'm watching it right now on the security feed. You need to see this." 40 minutes later, Dr. Pemberton arrived with Nurse Calloway. They went directly to the children's room. Lizzie was still there, sitting on the floor with Dave in her lap, Ava and Pat watching from their beds, all of them glowing with exhaustion and joy. Pemberton examined Dave's legs, checked his muscle tone, asked him to flex his ankle. Dave did it. Then Pemberton's face changed, hardened. He turned to Lizzie. "What have you done?" Lizzie looked up, confused. I just helped him. He walked." "Didn't you see? You've performed unlicensed physical manipulation on a neurologically fragile child," Pemberton said, his voice cold. "Do you have any idea what you could have done? You could have severed his spinal cord completely. This is criminal negligence." Lizzie's stomach dropped. "But he's better. What you saw could be a temporary muscular spasm that causes catastrophic damage later. You're not a doctor. You have no medical training. You have endangered this child's life." Nurse Calloway stepped forward. "I warned her. 2 weeks ago, I told her explicitly not to touch these children. She disobeyed a direct order." Arthur stood in the doorway, frozen. Part of him wanted to defend Lizzie. But another part, the part that had trusted experts his whole life, the part that feared losing his children, defaulted to credentialism. "Lizzie," he said quietly, "why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" "I tried," she whispered. "I saw the changes I thought." "You thought?" Arthur's voice rose. "You're not qualified to think about their medical care. That's Dr. Pemberton's job." Pemberton turned to Arthur. "I need to examine all 3 children immediately. And this woman needs to be removed from your house." Arthur looked at Lizzie, at the woman who'd just given his son back his legs. And fear won. "Lizzie, you need to leave. Now. Mr. Frederick, please." If you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police. The children screamed. Dad, no. She helped us. Don't make her leave. But Arthur couldn't look at them. He walked out. Lizzie stood slowly, trembling. Ava handed her one last paper crane, tears streaming down her face. Lizzie tucked it in her pocket and whispered, I love you, babies. I'm so sorry. She walked out into the cold November night at 2:10 a.m., got in her car, and drove away. Silent tears poured down her face as she clutched the steering wheel. The eviction notice still taped to her dashboard, her entire world collapsing around her. She'd saved those children, and it had cost her everything. Arthur couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., he sat in his study, staring at nothing. He kept replaying the moment Dave walked, the joy on his son's face, the sound of his children laughing, and the look on Lizzie's face when he sent her away. He opened his laptop and pulled up the triplets' medical files, something he hadn't personally reviewed in 2 years. He'd trusted the experts, trusted Pemberton. He scrolled through recent reports, standard updates, no changes, same prognosis. Then he found it, a neurological scan dated April 14th, 26 months ago, 2 years after the accident. Attached was a consultation note from Dr. Pemberton's team. Arthur clicked it open, and his world stopped. MRI dated April 14th reveals myoneural compression at lumbar vertebrae L4, L5, consistent with reversible traumatic neuropathy secondary to vehicle impact. Muscular atrophy present, but not degenerative. Recommend 8-week intensive physical therapy protocol with expected 60 to 70% motor function recovery. Prognosis, good. Arthur's hands started shaking. Reversible, 60 to 70% recovery. Good prognosis. Below the medical summary, in Pemberton's handwriting, discussed with family. Ongoing monitoring advised. Below that, stamped in red, no follow-up scheduled. Continue standard care protocol. Arthur stared at the screen. Discussed with family. He pulled up his calendar from April 2 years ago. No meetings with Pemberton. No phone calls. Nothing. Pemberton had never told him. Arthur opened the billing records with trembling fingers. Pemberton's team had billed $1.87 million over the past 2 years. Monthly charges between $85,000 and $110,000. Services listed: advanced monitoring, experimental protocols, specialist consultations. If the children had recovered 2 years ago, the billing would have stopped. Arthur searched his company email for Pemberton's name. Found internal correspondence from 18 months ago. Subject: consulting agreement renewal. Dr. M. Pemberton. Body: Dr. Pemberton's annual consulting contract has been renewed. Contract performance tied to maintaining minimum 6 active long-term pediatric case studies for pharmaceutical trial data. Arthur's blood went cold. Pemberton's income was contingent on keeping children sick. He printed everything: the MRI report, the billing records, the email. He sat in silence, staring at the documents spread across his desk. His children had been kept in wheelchairs for profit. For 2 years, they'd suffered needlessly. And the woman who saved them, the woman he'd just thrown out of his house, had been accused of endangering them. At 4 a.m., Arthur called Pemberton's cell. Arthur, it's 4 in the morning. You knew. Silence. 2 years ago, you knew they could recover. You wrote it in your report. Reversible traumatic neuropathy. 60 to 70% recovery. You knew. Arthur, those scans were inconclusive. The prognosis was speculative. It says good prognosis. It says recommend intensive PT. Who buried it? I made a clinical judgment. You made $1.87 million. Arthur's voice was shaking with rage. You kept my children in wheelchairs so you could keep billing me. And when someone actually helped them, you tried to have her arrested. You're misinterpreting. You're fired. You, Calloway, your entire team. You're all fired. And I'm reporting you to the state medical board, the AMA, and the FBI for medical fraud. Arthur, you can't. Arthur hung up. He grabbed his coat and drove into the night. He had to find her. Arthur drove to Lizzie's address at 5:30 a.m. The apartment complex was small, run down. He knocked on apartment 2C. Lizzie answered, eyes red, still in her work uniform. She froze. Mr. Frederick, can I come in? She stepped aside, silent. Arthur sat at her tiny kitchen table and spread out the documents. The MRI report, the billing records, the emails. I owe you an apology, he said, and an explanation. He showed her everything. Lizzie read in silence, tears beginning to fall. They knew. Arthur said, voice breaking. For 2 years, they knew my children could recover, and they buried it, because keeping them sick was profitable. Lizzie stared at the documents. Your own doctors, my own company's doctors. I trusted their credentials, and they kept my children in wheelchairs for money. Arthur's voice cracked. You saw what they missed. You did what they wouldn't, and I almost had you arrested for it. Then Arthur knelt on the floor of her tiny kitchen. Lizzie, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Mr. Frederick, get up. No. You saved my children. You loved them when I couldn't even look at them. You risked everything, and I sent you away. I forgive you, she whispered. They both cried. Arthur stood. I want you to come back. Not as a maid, as their caregiver. I'll pay for nursing school. I'll cover your grandmother's care. I'll pay off your rent. Lizzie shook her head. I don't need your money, Mr. Frederick. I just want to see those babies again. Arthur smiled through tears. They've been asking for you all night. At 6 a.m., as the sun rose, Arthur and Lizzie returned to the estate. The children were awake at the window. When they saw Lizzie, they screamed. Lizzie ran to them, dropped to her knees, held all three. Lizzie, you came back. We thought you were gone forever. We love you. I love you too, babies. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next 6 months, everything changed. Lizzie finished nursing school. Dave, Ava, and Pat completed intensive therapy. Dave walked independently. Ava walked with a cane. Pat walked with leg braces. Grandmother Loretta moved into the estate's guest house. Lizzie became part of the family. Dr. Pemberton lost his medical license. The state medical board launched an investigation. Arthur used the scandal to reform his company's ethics. 1 year later, Arthur and Lizzie stood on the porch, watching the triplets run through the garden. You know, Arthur said, I spent $4 million trying to fix them, and all they needed was someone who loved them. Lizzie smiled. Love and a little physical therapy. Arthur laughed. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I scared you. Don't be. You saved my children's lives. You saved mine too. The children called from the garden. Lizzie, Dad, come play. They walked into the sunlight together. The silent tears that had haunted this family were gone. Now, there were only joyful shouts and laughter echoing through the estate. Lizzie whispered quietly, Thank you, Lord, for letting me be part of this, for using me. Thank you. If this story touched your heart, this channel needs you. We're a family here, and our mission is to reach more people who need hope, who need to be reminded that God sees them, that miracles still happen, and that love always wins. Help us reach more hearts by subscribing now. Your support means everything. God bless you.